U.S. President Donald Trump has urged Iranian protesters to continue their demonstrations, promising them that help is on its way. Now, this statement comes amid reports that nearly 2,000 people have been killed in a crackdown following weeks of anti-government protests in Iran. Now, President Trump issued his message directly to Iranian demonstrators on Truth Social, calling them Iranian patriots and urging them to keep protesting and take control of state institutions. He warned that those responsible for killing and abusing protesters would pay a big price and said he has cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials until what he called the senseless killing stops. Now, the most striking line, however, was Trump's declaration that help is on its way without offering any details on what that assistance might involve. Now, while it remains unclear what help is on its way specifically means, the message marks a major escalation in the already strained relations between Tehran and Washington. Remember, just a day earlier, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said he remained in contact with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and that communication channels between Tehran and Washington were still open. Meanwhile, speaking to the media, Trump said he is seeking accurate numbers on what he described as significant killings in Iran and has warned that he will act accordingly. Now, Trump further declined to spell out what form of U.S. response might take, keeping Washington's next move deliberately ambiguous as tensions with Tehran continue to rise. Listen in.
Iran is on my mind when I see the kind of death that is happening over there, we think. So we're going to get some accurate numbers. I'll have it in about 20 minutes. We'll get some accurate numbers as to what's happening with regard to the killing. The killing looks like it's significant, but we don't know yet for certain. I'll know within 20 minutes. So, and we'll act accordingly.
Do you want to see democracy in Iran?
Ideally, I'd like to see it, but what we want to see is we don't want to see people killed, and we want to see a little bit of freedom for these people. These people have been living in hell for a long time.
Meanwhile, India's trade and economic engagement with Iran remains limited and is unlikely to face any major fallout from the latest tariff threat issued by the United States President Donald Trump, according to Indian government sources. Now, Trump has said that any country doing business with Iran will face a 25% tariff on its trade with the United States. But officials in New Delhi say India's exposure is minimal. Iran does not even feature among India's top 50 trading partners. Now, last year, India's total trade with Iran stood at around $1.6 billion, accounting for just 0.15% of India's overall trade. The government sources also expect this figure to decline further in the coming financial year due to broader external economic pressures. India's exports to Iran are largely humanitarian in nature, dominated by food items and pharmaceuticals. Officials say it is still unclear whether Trump's proposed tariff would apply to such trade, which traditionally falls outside of U.S. sanctions. The Federation of Indian Export Organizations has said Indian companies and banks are in full compliance with U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control sanctions, engaging only in clearly permitted humanitarian transactions. FIO has, however, sought explicit clarification from Washington to remove any ambiguity. Now, notably, previous U.S. sanctions imposed in 2018 had already caused a sharp drop in the India-Iran trade.
We have to see because Chabahar trade is an investment-related decision, and in the past, India has sought sanctions exempted on the Chabahar port, and the development of the port has started. We have to see to what extent this kind of executive statement which has been given will apply to the Chabahar port, and accordingly a call may be taken. So as of now, when he's talking about additional 25% tariff, probably it is not applying to the development of Chabahar port, which is not something related to the trade, which is related to the investment and development of infrastructure.
And staying with the tariff story coming by the U.S. President Donald Trump on countries which are doing trade with Iran. Now, China, the largest buyer of Iranian oil, has warned it could take countermeasures in response to Donald Trump's decision to impose 25% tariff on countries that continue to trade with Iran. Reacting on Tuesday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said there are no winners in a tariff war and Beijing will firmly safeguard its legitimate and lawful rights and interests. Analysts say the threat has sent shockwaves through Beijing, given its reliance on cheaper Iranian oil and concerns that Trump's tariffs could undermine energy security and broader strategic interests. China has indicated strong opposition to what it calls unilateral coercive measures, warning that tariffs and trade wars will not resolve global disputes and emphasizing the need to protect its own economic position amid rising global tensions. But US President Donald Trump says he believes China can open its markets to American goods. Speaking to reporters, Trump said the US is doing very well with China and expressed confidence that greater access for US products is likely, citing his strong relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Listen in.
Would that deal open Chinese markets to U.S. goods and protect intellectual property? Can we get back to that?
Yeah, we can. We're doing very well with China. I have a great relationship with President Xi, as you obviously know. We're doing really well. We're making a lot of money with China.
Can you open their markets to U.S. goods?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's going to happen.
Meanwhile, the European Union is considering additional sanctions against Iran, the bloc's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, said on Tuesday. Now, Kallas made these remarks during a visit to Berlin, speaking alongside German Defense Minister as concerns mount over Iran's crackdown on protesters. Listen in.
The heavy-handed and brutal response by the security forces is unacceptable and exposes a regime afraid of its own people. The EU already has sweeping sanctions in place on Iran, on those responsible for the human rights abuses, nuclear proliferation, and Tehran's support for Russia's war. And we are discussing on putting additional sanctions.